expected great action from God of War, and it delivers that handily. But I didn't expect it to be a thrilling journey in which every aspect of it complements the others to form a masterpiece that is by far the most stirring and memorable game in the series.
And like its predecessors, God of War is a technical and artistic showcase. It is without a doubt one of the best-looking console games ever released, with every breathtaking environment and mythical character exhibiting impressive attention to detail and beautifying flourishes aplenty. The vision behind all of this is evident in Kratos' meticulously grizzled physique.
Look at the mechanics. You have an axe that pretty much acts like Mjolnir. You throw it, you can call it back to you. But out the gate, the battle mechanics, the camera placement, it's kind of over the shoulder behind you. It's completely different than the other God of War games. And that was necessary. I mean, the other God of War games, it's a big tale for revenge. The gods have wronged Kratos. Now Kratos is going to kill him. That's all fun and dandy, but if they were going that route again, there'd be no need for a new game.
If you have a PlayStation 4, you're really letting yourself down if you don't play it. For what this game set out to do, for what it aimed to give us, and the final product that was released, 10 out of 10 easy. And I struggle to give games 10 out of 10. That's not me trying to say it's the perfect game or it is a perfect game, even though I think it is so near perfect. But again, what it set out to do, 10 out of 10.
God of War doesn't just feel like the next step for the franchise, but the entire video game industry. Phenomenal visuals, rewarding exploration, and a deep, nuanced combat system contribute to an epic adventure that should be experienced by every human on Earth. Santa Monica Studio is taking us all to Valhalla.
Excuse me. God of War wasn't the best game ever made. Yes, it had good graphics and it had okay gameplay, but it was not the best game ever made. It was not the best game ever made. It's actually incredible to me how many people gave this game such high reviews. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not a bad game by any stretch of the imagination. Santa Monica Studio did a great job here, especially when it comes to the graphics and the storytelling, when it comes to the world and the environment and all that stuff. It's all great. But this game has a lot of issues, and they become a lot more relevant the more you play through it. God of War is not a game that's fun to play multiple times. In my opinion, it isn't even really that fun when you play it the first time, but I guess that's arguable. The most important thing that I think God of War got wrong is the story, and I'm going to go into great detail of that for the beginning. Just so you guys know, there's going to be spoilers in this review for the story. If you haven't played it yet, the game has been out for a long time by now, so you don't really have an excuse, but if you want to skip, you can. Anyways, here we go. Alright, so let's get the good stuff out of the way. The good stuff is the way this story is presented to the player is very well done. They do a very good job introducing these characters to you. And this scene right here, there's a great amount of character development in just a few seconds that shows Kratos's mystique and the way he wants to hide things from his son, but at the same time his son's interest in his father and trying to learn from him as Kratos continuously hides his past from him. I thought this was a great way to open up the game and introduce these characters, and for the beginning part of the game it does a very good job of setting the stage for a very good story, and I really was very impressed with the first few hours of this game. It wasn't until the second half of the game where I started to see the issues. Now, the thing about a video game like The Last of Us, which is what God of War is getting compared to a lot because of its slow storytelling and pacing nature, is that The Last of Us told a complete story throughout its entire game. It was a story about Joel who learns to trust someone and trust himself to start to care for another human being rather than only himself, and that this other human being happens to resemble his daughter. So it makes sense in that world and that narrative for Joel and also Ellie to form a relationship, and you understand their relationship. It grows in a very understandable way as each of them go through different trials and tribulations throughout the game, learning about one another. And not only that, the story is concluded. You can argue that there is no need for a second part to The Last of Us because the story concludes itself so perfectly in the one single game. Now, granted, there is going to be a part 2, but it was completely unnecessary in terms of storytelling. As a story, The Last of Us 1 stands alone and perfectly fine without a follow-up. You cannot say the same for God of War. God of War is not a complete story. There is a lot of things missing here. There are a lot of things left unattended to, a lot of loose threads, and that's because, well, of course, there's going to be a sequel for this game. Everyone already knows there's going to be sequels for this game. It's planted all over it, but that's the problem, because they're so busy trying to prepare for sequels, they forgot to tell an entire story. So what is the story for God of War? Well, it's about Kratos and his son taking his wife's ashes to the top of the highest mountain in the realm. You know what happens in this game? Kratos and his son takes his wife's ashes to the highest mountain in the realm. That's it. There's nothing else like that. You would expect something else to happen there, but nothing else happens. Okay, I may be exaggerating here. There are some other things that happen, but for the most part, that's it. And it's actually quite underwhelming when you really get down into it. Okay, there's no real story here. But I'm gonna break it down. I'm gonna break it down from the very beginning of the game. Okay, we can start from the very beginning, and you tell me where the story is, because I just can't find it. So for the sake of this video not being 200,000 hours long, I'm going to try to segue this as much as I possibly can without missing any key points. So basically the story begins, like I said, with Kratos burning his wife's ashes on this tree that she told them to chop down. Now, the tree that she told them to chop down actually allowed for other gods to enter their part of the woods, because before they were not allowed to because of the trees that she had set up. She basically set up a protected barrier. Kratos and his son were unaware of this barrier until a god starts entering their part of the woods and tampering with it. Then they find out, which is kind of weird that they would be unaware of a giant glowing barrier around them, but whatever, I digress. While Kratos' wife's ashes are burning, her name is Faye, so I'm going to call her Faye from now on, the boys go hunting for some deer. Okay, so they finally catch up to the deer. The son kills the deer. Everyone's seen this scene in the trailer, but if you haven't seen it, he kills the freaking deer, right? And then we run into our first story and gameplay issue, which is the first boss of this game, which I've seen a lot of people complain about, but I would say not enough people complain about this. This boss that appears right now is the most laziest boss I have ever seen. He is reskinned and repurposed so many times in this game. It's not even funny how many times we run into this guy and with a different costume on. It's actually impressively embarrassing how many times you run into this guy. It's a joke, and they should be ashamed of themselves for repeating the same boss over and over again, especially when God of War has always been known for having good bosses. But I'll get into that more later. For now, we're just going to stick to the story. So you kill this big bastard for the first of 100,000 times in your playthrough, and you see your son go into a rampage. Now, this is where they kind of set the seed for something interesting to happen. As I said, the story was paced and set up very well at the beginning, with the boy acting very strangely when it comes to violence and his violent nature. Kratos calms him down, and he mentions something about not being sick anymore, and Kratos says that he's not ready for their adventure that they are going to be going on because he cannot control his temper. Like I said, all of this is very good. It sets up something for you, for the player to question. Why is the boy sick? What's wrong with him? Why does he have issues, and why is he behaving in this way? And for the most part, you do get an answer for this, but the answer isn't really that climactic, but I'll get into it when it shows up. For now, we're just going to continue on the story from where we are now. So once you get home, Kratos tries to teach his son that he should use his anger only as a weapon and nothing more than that, rather than just being angry at nothing, pretty much, which is a perfectly fine lesson for Kratos to be teaching him, considering he is one of the angriest guys there ever was to exist. But this is where we meet our main antagonist in this story, Baldur. Now, Baldur was an interesting god to go with. He has the ability to not be able to take any damage for the most part until you find his weakness, which will be explained later. He's not very famous as a god. He's not a very popular Norse god, I would say. There are much more popular Norse gods than him, and they're obviously saving those Norse gods for future titles. So they have to go with the least popular ones at the beginning, and this is one of them. But I will say that when Baldur is introduced here, he is very interesting, very intimidating, and it's a very good dialogue that he has with Kratos, and he's acted very well too, at least at the beginning. You're not very sure of his motives. You question him. You don't understand why he's here. You think maybe he's got a problem with you. He does tell you that he was sent by Odin, and maybe Odin has a problem with you. You really don't know why he's here. It's a very good that they set this up for the player, but it's just a lot of setup that doesn't have much payoff. And once again, I'll get into that later. I know I'm saying that a lot, but I have to set this stuff up the same way the game does so I can explain it to you the same way the game does. But one thing is for sure, this does lead to one of the biggest highlights in the game, which is this boss fight. But just like the previous boss fight, this boss fight is re-altered and reskinned multiple times throughout the gameplay, resulting in something that is once again underwhelming. I don't mind fighting the same boss twice, but when you do it 3 times, I do think that's kind of pushing it, especially when there are not many bosses in this game to begin with, and they're already reskinning a different boss. So we'll get into this more later. So Kratos, quote unquote, kills Baldur, even though he knows Baldur can't be killed because Baldur tells him he doesn't feel pain. And it doesn't really make any sense if you think about it. Why did Baldur just go unconscious there for so long that he doesn't even try to attack Kratos and his son for a very long time from now, even though he's literally right next to them? It really does not make any sense in the narrative. The reason why they did this was because they needed to get rid of Baldur right now after introducing him, but it's still poor writing. They could have found a better way to get rid of him. Maybe Odin called him back. Maybe Kratos makes a crater between them. Just putting him to sleep for a few hours just doesn't make much sense, especially considering everything that they've set up for the character thus far. But whatever, I digress. So Kratos reflects on the battle he just had and noticed that the gods have now noticed him, and he has to be ready to move on with his son because he is not safe at their home. Key word, he is not safe at their home. So keep that in mind. So Atreus asks Kratos what happened, and Kratos tells him that they fought a man. He fought a man and he killed him. Well, he doesn't say that he killed him, but he implies that he killed him, and Atreus starts to understand and think that he killed him. So yeah, Kratos is clearly trying to hide the fact that he's a god, but the thing is, Kratos just destroyed half of the fucking planet right here. There's no way Atreus could just assume that his father is a normal person after he destroyed half the planet. Wouldn't you be like, whoa, I've lived here my whole life and I never saw this fucking huge fucking crater, Dad. Where'd this fucking crater come from, man? So the troublesome duo make their way up the mountain, and you run into your first pack of humanoid enemies. And these guys are not monsters like the guys you've had to fight previously, so the game tries to give some type of climactic and sad moment when Atreus kills his first human person. And to be honest, it kind of falls a little flat. This is because we haven't had much time to get adjusted to Atreus and Kratos, and before now, Atreus seemed to have no problem with the idea and prospect of killing human beings. But you know, I guess they were just trying to build a relationship and character development between the father and son right here. But once again, I think it was just a little too soon and it fell a little too flat. It felt a lot like that moment in The Last of Us where Joel consoles Ellie after she kills a guy who supposedly was trying to rape her. But the difference there is that Joel and Ellie had pretty much directly connected at that point and built a bond at that point, and it was a lot better climax than this. Pretty much all you're doing here is just picking Atreus up off the ground. It's really not that deep, kid. Not only that, but once again, to compare it to The Last of Us, right after the scene I was talking about with Ellie, we got a time skip, so we didn't get to see Ellie's direct growth or reaction to this moment directly after it happened, but with Atreus, we're playing with him and walking with him, and he doesn't really seem to be affected at all, and that is a running trend in this game. But I'll get into that later. Right after this is where you meet Brock and eventually Sindri. These guys are the guys who upgrade your armor throughout the game. I'm not going to go into these two as they are pretty much inconsequential when it comes to the overarching plot. The armor that they make for you and the upgrades they make to your axe are pretty cool, but I don't really care too much about those things, as I think they are fine as it comes when it comes to the game. They worked and function perfectly fine. Not too much to go into there, so I'm just gonna leave all that stuff out because it's not really important. So the boys go hunting again for some food, and this time they run into a magical boar, and this magical boar leads them to meet the worst character in the game. Now, I could go on for hours about why Freya is a terrible character, but I'm just gonna sum it up into two things. One, she solves every single issue, like literally every single issue in the game. She solves it. Boy, we cannot get to the top of this mountain. Oh, I know, the witch will do it. Oh, boy, we chopped off this fucking old ass dude's head. How do we get him to talk again? Oh, I know, the witch will do it. Boy, you're passed out because I'm an idiot. That's right, the witch will do it. Boy, my cock hurts. Back to the story. So Freya convinces Kratos and Atreus to help her bring the pig that they almost killed back to life, and in the process Freya tells Kratos that it is dangerous for Atreus to not know that he is a god, and Freya tells him that she knows that they are both gods. And guess what Kratos says? He says, well, I'm not gonna tell him shit, don't worry about it, this is my son, I do what I want to do, I'm Kratos, I know what's best for my son, I don't want him to know that he's a god. Hoo hoo toot toot toot. She also tells them that the gods will make things difficult for them if they find out they're there. But they've been living there for 10 years and they just now happen to find them. But that's because Faye, the genius, decided to open up the entrance for them to come in for some fucking reason. I don't know why she did that. They never explain it, but whatever. So this is where we are, and they kill the fucking pig and they move the fuck on. I guess you could say it's around here where the story starts to lose a lot of momentum. The overarching goal that was once opposed to the player starts to get further and further away as you start to realize that you're not getting to the top of that fucking mountain anytime soon. There's a lot of other things you have to do until you get there. I was always under the impression that getting to the top of the mountain is where the game would start. You know, this is the tutorial part. Getting to the top of the mountain would be the mid part, and then after that the game really would pick up once we learn more about the characters and things like that. But no, I was completely fucking wrong. There is none of that. The end goal is this fucking mountain, but there's just shit getting in the way all the fucking time that constantly makes it more and more annoying to get there. And once you do get there, you realize it's the wrong mountain, yada yada yada. You probably heard this all before, but I'm just reiterating it here to get you guys to understand that the plot of this game doesn't really have much push to it after the first few hours. Either way, the boys meet this giant fucking snake, which helps you along in your journey for some fucking reason. It's not a mean snake, he's a pretty chill snake, and this snake is very, very cool looking, and he does come into play later on in the game. But it's a very cool looking snake. They did a very good job with the presentation of this snake. It's a world serpent, it's a god, whatever. It's a pretty cool looking thing, and they did a very good job with it, and he helps you move on. I don't know why I'm rambling so much. Fuck. So after a bunch of fucking walking around and exploring, the boys finally make it to the top of the mountain, and of course there's a black fog blocking the way. They have no idea how to get past this, and they wouldn't have any idea how to get past this if it wasn't for the witch, who appears magically out of thin air to tell them what exactly this is and how to do it, to get past it. In order to do so, they have to go on a fucking quest, of course. Of course, Kratos is suspicious and grabs the witch and asks, "Why are you willing to help us?" And she tells him, well, she sees a lot of her in herself. which, okay, well, that doesn't really make sense. It doesn't even make sense later, but whatever. So Freya introduces the boys to the World Tree, which pretty much acts as a gate between realms. She grants them access to the Elf realm, but there's a lot of other realms that you don't have access to that you would expect to have access to later, namely being Asgard, which is where Odin would be. And since the game very much hints at Asgard at this part, you would assume that later on during the game you get to go there, but nope, you never get to go there. But as far as this room goes, I guess it's a pretty cool teleport room, and that's pretty much it. Once they get to the elf world, Freya gets sucked back and the boys are on their own again. Freya is not allowed to leave the realm she was in because Odin said that's a big no-no, so she can't go nowhere. Bye-bye. While the elf world does look rather interesting, it does pretty much nothing for the overarching narrative. You're only there to get access to the top of the mountain. The only part of this area that has any plot significance, I guess you can argue, is that when Kratos walks through this portal light thingy and he gets to hear the voice of his dead wife as well as his son, and you get further insight into the way Atreus feels about Kratos. But this scene really feels like a lot of emotional manipulation, and I'll explain why. Atreus says things that are so cliche, like, I hate him and I wish he died instead of you, Mom. It should have been him. Why'd you leave me here with him? Anyone but him. I don't want to be with him. And it's just like, oh my God, please shut up. The thing is, I'm not sure if this was meant to fuck with Kratos' head or if it was meant to give a direct insight to the way Atreus feels. I have no idea. Maybe it's to give us how Kratos feels that Atreus feels about him. Either way, it doesn't make much sense because there's nothing that's been shown to us that Atreus feels this way about Kratos. And if he did feel this way about Kratos, it would be a lot more natural if we found out about it in a different way rather than a stupid fucking vision. So Kratos comes out and Atreus is angry with Kratos because Kratos left him there for a very long time. To Kratos, it only seems like a short amount of time, but to Atreus, it was a lot longer because he fought a lot of enemies by himself. And Atreus kind of goes off on Kratos here, and this action is kind of justified. It makes sense for him to be upset at Kratos because he felt like Kratos just was ignoring him and didn't care about him. But at the same time, Kratos has never not cared about him before. He's always been there to protect him. So Atreus should know that maybe it was outside of Kratos' ability to come back, because if he could have come back, he most likely would have, considering that he's always been there to protect him thus far. It's really hard to be mad at either of them here, and not only that, Atreus doesn't stay mad for very long. Like I said, his emotions from the scenes don't really carry for much long into the games, so we'll just move on. So now that they have the tool that they need to get to the top of the mountain, the boys use the tool to get there and get rid of this black fucking smoke. And once they get to the top of the mountain, they do end up fighting a dragon boss, which is a pretty cool boss fight. Even though there's only like fucking 5 boss fights in the game, they're all pretty cool at least. So once they get to the top of the mountain, they discover that they're on the wrong mountain. Oh no! They also meet a guy named Mimir who's attached to a tree, has been tortured by Odin for years, and he asks Kratos to cut his head off so that he can be released from the tree, and Kratos decides to do so, and so they must go back to the witch in order to revive the head because they have no fucking idea how to do it. But before Kratos chops his head off, the tree tells Kratos that he's fucking stupid for not telling Atreus he's a god, and Kratos of course ignores the advice for the second time in a row, but whatever. The witch of course revives the head and Mimir becomes a new party member. The three set out to go to Jotunheim, which is the land of the giants. This is where the highest peak in all the realms are instead of the mountain that they thought it was previously. Now I'm not going to go through the entire quest because I don't think it's really that important to the plot. Just know that they had to do a lot of shit, but it basically leads up to a fight between Magni and Modi, which are the next two gods in this story. Now Magni and Modi are also not very popular Norse gods, but they are important in this story because they directly impact Atreus more than anything else in the game, I guess you could say. So the boss fight itself is actually decent. I'm not gonna really have too much issues or complaints about the boss fight, but basically what happens is Kratos kills one of the brothers, I believe it's Magni, and the other brother runs away. Atreus is, of course, super angry and all that, and yeah, that's pretty common at this point, right? The next time we see Modi, the brother that survived, he catches Kratos off guard and does some electric attack on him that keeps him stunned in place, in which case Atreus is left there standing around like an idiot. Atreus then gets super angry and passes out, and then that is when we receive the information that because of Kratos continuously ignoring the fact that he is not telling his son who he is hurting him physically and actually taking away some of his life. This causes Kratos to have to go on a journey to hell in order to receive an item for Freya to revive Atreus from his near-death experience, and in order to do so he has to receive his Chaos Blades because his axe will not work in hell. Now, the Chaos Blades being brought back is a very cool thing, and it does seem very interesting, and it's very awesome that Kratos has them. And I mean, it's cool and everything, but I just don't really like it. I think it really messes with the continuity of the character. We've been given this whole time that Kratos has been trying to hide his past. Well, why would he keep the blades? It just doesn't make much sense for him to have them in the first place, especially so close. You would think he would have thrown them away when he left Greece. And another thing is, they never really answer how Kratos was able to survive his near-death experience at the end of God of War 3. There's a lot of continuity errors with Kratos, especially when you consider that he doesn't even treat his son the same way he treated his own daughter, which he really had no issues connecting with his daughter, but he seems to have a lot of issues connecting with his son, which doesn't really make much sense either. Like I said, Kratos has a lot of continuity errors in this game, which makes me feel like I think this game would have been a lot better if there were just new characters rather than Kratos being reincarnated. It really doesn't make much sense. But Atreus is revived, and Kratos finally decides to tell the boy that he's a god. And it goes exactly the way you would expect it to. Completely fucking wrong. Atreus actually gets egotistical and thinks that he's the hot shit because he's a god and he can do whatever he wants to do. This leads to him killing Modi right after Kratos tells him not to kill him, which is the first time Atreus outrightly disobeys his father. Now, you've got an interesting dynamic here. You've got a boy who thinks he's a god so he can do whatever he wants, and a father who's trying to restrain him. The problem is that it wasn't built up well. You see, it was just a few moments ago where Atreus was revealed to be a god. It would have made a lot of more sense, and it would have weighed a lot more heavily if a few days, or not days, but maybe a few hours in the game had passed that allowed Atreus to really start to believe that he was a god and that he was able to do whatever he wants. From the storytelling perspective, it would have been a lot stronger if the time had been handled a little bit better, but instead Atreus immediately believes that he's better than everyone else, and this goes only to take away from his character rather than to add to it, because he doesn't really have a reason to feel this way other than the fact that Kratos told him that he's a god. Just to reiterate, I don't think that it's wrong for Atreus to behave in the way he's behaving, but I just think that it didn't happen in a natural and organic manner. I think that's a lot of the issues with this story, is that it doesn't happen naturally. It just happens to move the plot along, and the way that the issue is solved is even more frustrating. Kratos just tells him, "Your mother would be ashamed of you, so stop." And Atreus is like, "Okay," and then Atreus goes back to being his normal helpful person who isn't a fucking asshole to everyone. It's just very cheap and simple, and it doesn't really add to the story at all. If these moments had been handled with a little bit more care and over a little bit more time, maybe give Atreus a time where he actually leaves Kratos' side because he really believes that he doesn't need his help, and then Atreus finds that he actually does need Kratos, and that just because he's a god he doesn't work alone. I don't know, something like that. I'm not the guy who wrote this story, but I'm saying is that it just doesn't flow organically. It doesn't flow naturally. It just seems very forced. And I think that is a big issue, especially considering this is supposed to be the biggest character development of this character in the game. If you really think about it, Atreus doesn't develop at all. And when I say at all, I mean at all. Like literally, Atreus is the same exact person that he was at the start of the game, at the end of the game. There's nothing really different about him. It doesn't really make any sense at all. The only thing is that he knows that he's a god, and he knows of his heritage. He knows more of who he is, but he doesn't change as a person. He doesn't grow. He doesn't learn anything. And you can argue that this is just because it's the first point of the game, but that makes him a weak character in the first point of the game. In the first point of the franchise, he is a weak character. Kratos at least develops a little bit because he learns a way to bond with his son. While I do not agree that he needed to learn how to bond with a child, because as I said earlier, he learned how to bond from his daughter, but as far as this story goes, he does learn how to bond with his son. So Kratos definitely had some kind of character development in this story, but Atreus did not have any at all. Here's hoping that he has some in the sequel. So the last important thing that happens in the plot is that in order to get to Jotunheim, the guys have to go inside of the World Serpent, and they go inside of the World Serpent to find something, and that leads to Baldur attacking the World Serpent and then thus attacking them, which leads to the final boss fight. But before the final boss fight begins, you found out that Freya is actually the mother of Baldur, which leads to a very annoying dynamic. You see, Freya doesn't want Baldur to be killed by Kratos, but at the same time Baldur wants to kill Freya, and this leads to the boss fight. After you fight Baldur for the last time, he has a conversation with his mother, and his mother basically says, look dude, you want to kill me so bad, just fucking kill me. And Baldur's like, okay. So Baldur goes to kill him. Now the thing about this dynamic is it is not built up enough. I know there's a scene in Hell where Baldur gets to talk to Freya about how he feels and all that and shit like that, a vision of her, but it doesn't really give enough context to the situation. Why is Baldur so mad at Freya? Why does he want to kill her so bad? Why does he have so much issue with her? I guess it's heavily implied that Freya made Baldur unable to feel pain, but that is the reason why Baldur is alive right now, is because he's unable to feel pain. If he was able to feel pain, he would be dead a long time ago. Baldur only has one weakness, and that is these green arrows which Atreus shoots at them, which allows Kratos to kill him. Kratos kills Baldur because he doesn't want him to kill Freya, and Freya vows revenge on Kratos. Why she doesn't take it on him right here, I have no idea, but now Freya is an enemy rather than a friend. Now, this is why I said Freya is the worst character in the game. You cannot get mad at someone for saving your life. I understand that he killed your son, but you can't get angry. He saved your life. You were about to die. How can you be mad at him if he saved your life? It's like, there's no fucking reason for her to be mad at him at this point. It doesn't make any logical sense. There's some people out there that are gonna try to fight that and say, I don't care, you can't kill my kid, even if my kid's killing me. You're fucking retarded. You're a bad person. You're stupid. And so is Freya. Sorry. So Kratos and Atreus go to Jotunheim, and when they're there, Atreus accidentally touches a wall, which reveals a secret that I guess Kratos' wife and Atreus' mother wanted them to find out together. The secret is that Faye was a giant, and she had prophesied about all the things that happened. She was able to see into the future. She knew everything that was to come, and this is her way of telling them what is to come and what is to come in the future titles of the game, blah 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 blah. The thing that pisses me off about Faye is that she could have just told them everything instead of just letting this happen. She knew she was going to die. She knew what was going to happen. She knew they would have so many trials and tribulations to get to the top of this fucking mountain. Why not just tell them straight up what the big deal was? Why would she hide this from them? It doesn't make any fucking sense. Now, this is the thing that bothers me the most about this game, that made the least sense to me story-wise, and that is this, okay? So Odin has been trying to get to Jotunheim for a long ass fucking time, okay? And there's a lot of gods who tried to stop him, and one of them includes Faye. They tried to keep Odin out of Jotunheim no matter what. They wanted Odin not to go to Jotunheim. Why? I don't know. So the reason Baldur was sent to Kratos' house is because Faye lived there, and Faye was a giant. So they wanted to find Faye so they could find a way into Jotunheim. It all makes sense now, right? But the thing is, Faye sent Kratos and Atreus to Jotunheim, so when they go, they unlocked the way to Jotunheim, so now Odin can go there. So why was it so important for her ashes to be spread on top of this fucking mountain that they would sacrifice everything that all these other people tried to stop? Why? Why? Now Odin has complete access to Jotunheim. But they do finally spread the ashes on top of the fucking mountain. And then that is the end. The father and son have bonded. Game over. GG. I remember when I first saw the credits start rolling on the screen after this cutscene. I remember feeling not relief, not satisfaction, not joy, not happiness. I felt nothing. I felt empty. I felt shallow. I felt like I hadn't achieved anything. I felt like this whole journey was just a farce. I felt like everything I did meant nothing. I felt like I didn't get anywhere in this game. I felt like I didn't achieve anything. I felt like the story didn't go anywhere. I felt like nothing. And I don't know why, really. I mean, I guess I explained why, but it's a really bad feeling when you go through this entire journey and it just doesn't seem like you got anywhere. I'm telling you, at the beginning of this game, I thought it was going to be so much more, but these credits right here really sold it home to me that it was over and I was done with this journey, and I have to wait until the second game before I get to experience any kind of continuation to this plot. And it's just like, wow, this is really it, guys? This is it? This is the grand story I was promised? Really? This is what's getting all the 10s out of 10s? Really? I don't know, man. I just don't see it. To add insult to injury, you even go back home, which I thought you weren't allowed to do. Remember, Kratos said they couldn't stay here anymore, and not only that, all the gods know where they live now, and they just have killed 3 gods. So don't you think some gods will be coming to this house? I don't think this house is very safe, guys. But whatever, you go back to the house, and then you get teased a real god, Thor, a real god, you know, a god that you actually know of, and maybe you would want to fight. Nope, you'll have to wait until the next game. Make sure you spend another $60. Like I said, this game isn't bad by any stretch of the imagination. It just feels like a lot of wasted potential. The presentation of this game was amazing. Some of the best there has ever been. The graphics are the best of any game in this generation. They had it all there. The storytelling was good. There just wasn't a story to tell. The story is incomplete. And I'm sorry, that is a big problem when you're trying to sell a story-driven game. I don't care if there's going to be sequels. The game has to be able to stand on its own, and in my opinion, God of War just doesn't. But alas, I digress. Thank you guys for watching this. If you enjoyed it, please hit me with a subscription. It took me a long time to make this. If you didn't enjoy it, go ahead and hit a dislike and then leave a comment explaining why you felt that way. I'd love to have a conversation with you. Anyway, it's your boy Hero. See you guys next time. Peace.